our session at hand here today, which is Ask a Clarkie. It's one of my favorite sessions each year because it's really all about you. It's about asking questions and getting information. So, you heard from our three current students very briefly, but I'm going to give them each the floor for 4, 5, 6 minutes apiece to share a few things. Give their full introduction, share a little bit about their Clark story. How they found Clark, what they were looking for. Their Clark story today, how their time at Clark has been so far. And if they have advice for choosing a college, I'll have them give that too. That should take maybe 10, 15 minutes. But then we're really going to open it up. And this is where all of you can ask questions in the Q&A feature. So we'll open it right up. You can ask them anything, and I'll moderate that portion of the presentation. So we begin with Morgan. Morgan, we'll go to you again. The floor is yours.
Hi, everyone. Like I said, and like Nick said, my name is Morgan. I'm a senior here at Clark, so wrapping up my last semester here. I'm originally from Baltimore, Maryland, but I'm calling from my off-campus apartment in Worcester right now. Here at Clark, I study English with a minor in community youth education studies, a concentration in comparative race studies, and I'm also on the pre-law track, so I will be starting law school this coming fall. And on campus, in addition to my academics and my job at admissions, currently I am one of the chapter leaders and a Bible study leader for InterVarsity Christian Fellowship, one of the executive editors who's generally in charge of grammar things for the research journal on campus. And then I'm also currently wrapping up both my English honors thesis and my Steinbrecher Fellowship research, which was fully funded independent research in the sociology department from this past summer. So in general, when I was choosing a college, I would not recommend taking my approach. I went to a very, very, very competitive high school. The narrative my whole life was kind of like Ivy or die. Like, if you don't go to an Ivy League, you are a failure. So when I did not get into the Ivy League of my choice, which was Princeton, I cried for like days straight. I didn't leave my bed. I ate an entire cheesecake in one sitting, was generally pathetic. I do not recommend. Maybe one slice if you like don't get in somewhere you want, not the whole thing. So it was a really like exhausting and emotional process for me. But I am very happy I ended up at Clark, obviously. I think some general things that stood out to me as I was picking a college, in general, Clark ended up on my list because I was really, really wanting a smaller school. I did not want to go above 10,000 students. And as I like really honed in my search in the last home stretch, I did realize I wanted to go much smaller. And I did not want to go any further south than where I already was. So I really only looked at schools in the Maryland, DC area, some schools in like Pennsylvania and Philly, and then mostly Northeastern schools. And I did really, really want to be in a city as well, but still have like a real campus experience. And there were shockingly few schools that fit that criteria, and Clark was one of them, which is how it originally ended up on my list, and was definitely that something that appealed to me about Clark. Just for context, I was between Clark and Fordham University in New York, which is a really great school. Actually, one of my best friends goes there now. I applied there for law school, so nothing but good things. But the reason I ended up at Clark was really just the amount of individualized attention I really got from Clark during all of my admitted students processes. I really felt like throughout my college search process, Clark made an effort to like get to know me, Morgan Hilton, as an individual and not just as like a GPA number or anything like that. So I had really like genuine conversations at the admitted students day that were very personalized to wanting to major in English and wanting to study abroad and all of these like very specific aspects of what I was hoping to get out of college. So I had a lot of like one-on-one conversations with people in the admissions office, with current students, with faculty, with people in the study abroad office, all of that stuff. And Clark was also the only like admitted students day where I actually made friends with anyone who was also in my position. So I think that really stood out. And in the end, I think in general, but particularly after such like a defeating college search experience, just the like care and love that I got from everyone at Clark really just meant the world to me. And sealed the deal for why I ended up coming here. So I would definitely say like I know it's really hard, like being in your position for, especially during COVID, because it's hard to pick up on those kind of like warm and fuzzy aspects when you're doing it all through a Zoom link. But I would definitely like pay attention to those things as you start to pick a college. I wish I had done more of that at the beginning of my college search process. So definitely pay attention to it now. And I'll pass it over to, I think Logan is next.
That works.
All right, so now that my Zoom is working properly, I apologize for the technical difficulties. My name is Logan. I am a junior at Clark University, currently studying mathematics with a minor in education. And outside of the classroom, I am part of the Clark Music Society. When there's not a global pandemic going on, I'm volunteering at a local high school and giving them help with geometry after school. And I also was a peer mentor this past year, so I did a lot of work with freshman orientation. So my Clark story is a little different. My sister was a Clark student while I was going through the college search process. And she kind of really pushed for me to look at Clark. And it wasn't something that I really wanted to, because I figured anything my sister touched, I shouldn't. It's part of the reason I never watched Disney Channel as a kid growing up, all that kind of stuff. I eventually just decided to look at it just to shut her up. I actually kind of fell in love with the place instantly. The big thing for me, I am probably the most indecisive person you'll ever meet. So obviously picking a major was way too big of a task for me. And the huge thing about Clark is they give you plenty of time to figure out what major you want to do. And also you have to take, as part of the program of liberal studies, a couple courses that, fulfill those specific needs. There's 9 different programs that you kind of have to fulfill. And those really allow you to figure out your path. So instead of what normally would have been like a traditional English course, instead I got to take a course like on management, which I thought was a lot more useful to kind of figuring out what I wanted to do. And that was really the draw for me. Anything that can help my indecisive mind was really huge. And, I was definitely worried about coming to school. Admitted student day, I felt very weird. I've always been in places where I've known people and I just knew nobody. I felt like a fish out of water, yet in a giant ocean at the same time. And so, I felt very uncomfortable about going to school at first. But the minute you get to Clark and you start having orientation, you really start to feel comfortable and really start to make this place your home. And I never would have thought, doing the college process that I'd be in a comfortable position where I am right now. I'm living at Clark still as a junior. I'm still on campus. And I've got, I've got a great support system, a ton of friends. I'm doing really well in my academic trajectory. I finally figured out what I want to do, which is huge for me. So very happy that I came to Clark. People even here are okay with me hanging up a Ritz poster. So very, very comfortable place. I really was able to make this place my home. And definitely my advice for choosing a college is to find some place that you can really make your home. Obviously you go to school to do academics and that's the point of school, but you can only do as good in academics if you feel comfortable where you're at. If you're not comfortable, if you're not happy, you can't put in your full effort. Mental health and personal growth and all that is just as important as being able to get your studies done. And they really do go hand in hand. So if you don't see yourself being comfortable in a school, it's probably not worth it. And that's why Clark was ultimately the pick for me. So I will pass it on to Gary.
Thanks, Logan. So like Nick mentioned earlier, my name is Gary. I'm a senior here at Clark, where I study political science. I'm originally from the Philippines, but I grew up in Hong Kong and New York City. Like Morgan, I'm also calling from my off-campus apartment in Worcester. Outside of my academics, some things that I'm involved in are our undergraduate student council, as well as the undergraduate academic board. And I'm also doing Clark's Eureka Challenge, which is a competition for students with small businesses for my small business called Radical in Progress. And I'll potentially, hopefully win $5,000 at the end of the month, fingers crossed. A bit about my Clark story. I went a bit overboard when I was a senior. I applied to 16 schools, and like Logan, I'm also indecisive. So when I got accepted to 10, I was very overwhelmed by choice. I did not have any criteria in mind. I just knew that I wanted to study political science. And from that, I was able to narrow it down to Clark and a good school in Washington, D.C. that is really good for political science. Um, and I ended up choosing Clark for two reasons. The first being, as someone who's grown up in a lot of countries, I identify as a third cultured kid. And Clark was the only school of the 10 that accepted me that had a page on their website for third cultured kids, and like had an office assistant who specialized in third cultured kids for the international students office. And although I didn't end up using that service, I found it to be very like comforting that I felt really seen, just by knowing that Clark knows that exists, that identity exists. And then the second reason I chose Clark was because I was also able to attend an admitted student stay. And I was, through the conversations that I had with faculty, with study abroad advisors, and especially with my host and her group of friends, I was able to really tell that I wouldn't just be a student at Clark, I'd be seen as a whole person, someone like who's not just here to pay tuition and get a degree and get out of here, like someone who has goals and ambitions. And I found that I would probably have a support network at Clark to help me meet those goals and ambitions. And now that I'm at my final semester here at Clark, well, I'm doing fifth year, which is our accelerated degree program for a master's degree. But it's my last semester of undergrad. I can definitely say that I've had that support system, and I felt very seen, and I feel very like I've grown a lot throughout my college career because of the people at Clark. Like, two of my professors I am very close to and will one day come to my wedding if I ever get married. Well, including a couple of like admin support staff as well. And like, that's how close I feel with some of my mentors here at Clark. So very thankful for that. And just some advice that I have for you all for choosing a college is, it's very similar to Logan's and Morgan's actually, but just know that you're only going to spend a certain number of hours a week actually doing classes and doing homework at college. You have a lot of time for yourself and to figure out what your passions are. So when thinking about a college, make sure you're not just thinking about what's the best degree or what's going to get me a job after college. Like, you have a whole life to live. And is that college going to help me thrive and live the life that I want to live? If that makes sense.
It makes sense to me, and I appreciate the three of you each sharing your stories. And this actually takes us to the second part of our conversation tonight, which is the open forum. So as soon as I get the slide to advance, there we go. So this is where we just open it up. If you can, use the Q&A feature as opposed to the chat feature. But we have about 30 minutes for all of our audience, all of our mid students, to ask questions. You can ask questions to me, though I'm pretty boring. But you can also ask, and I hope you do ask, questions to our three students. You can ask them generally, or if you heard something you want to know more about, you can say, hey, Morgan, I have a question. So feel free. I see the first couple coming in, so I'm going to start, but keep adding them. So the first question is, what is the food and dining life like at Clark? So does anybody have the strong feeling to start with this question? I feel like Logan might be good for this one.
Yeah, I can give a stab at it. So as far as like dining goes, it is college food, it is cafeteria food. I'm not gonna sit here and say you're gonna be eating a 5-star meal at every meal. That being said, though, they really do try their best to make it, as positive an experience as possible. There's plenty of different stations within just the cafeteria alone that should be able to give you enough of a variety that you're not eating the same thing every day. You absolutely can eat the same thing every day if you want. I went on a burger kick for a couple of weeks like last year, but there's plenty of different options if you're looking to change things up. There's also plenty of different stations for different eating allergies or eating styles. Vegetarian and vegan station. There's you can get options that are kosher, for example, anything like that. And also there's alternatives to just the cafeteria. A personal favorite of mine is the bistro, which is a little bit more grab and go, where you can, let's say you got to go to a classroom in the next 5 minutes. if you just need to grab a quick bite to eat and take it out to go, you can go to the bistro. And there's also Jasmine's Coffee, which is now doing meal swaps as well, given COVID, and also a great place to get a cup of coffee. Who would have thought? So it's definitely not going to be a 5-star meal, but they really do try their best, and they also do take a lot of student feedback as well. They have a little board that you can put up suggestions, which I've always used a ton. I was on a soft pretzel kick as well last year. I had a lot of kicks, and I wrote down on the board that I just really wanted a soft pretzel really bad. And the next day they had an entire station just for soft pretzels. I probably died in that moment and came back to life. It was the most beautiful moment ever. So they do try their best to make it as good of an experience as possible.
Just to quickly add on to that, I think the other thing I really, in addition to like the food itself, I think the cafeteria is like very much a communal experience that I like living off campus and being in COVID. That's the thing I probably miss the most, just like swiping into the caf for a cup of coffee and like running into people. So I think that's also for me, that makes the mediocre sometimes caf food well worth it, because I always ran into friends while I was there, and it was just like a really nice place to be as well.
Well said. Gary, next question I'm gonna give to you. Can you tell us one of your favorite political science classes?
Sure. I think my favorite political science course, there have been many, but the one that stands out to me was my first year intensive. So when you come to Clark, one of the PLS requirements you have to do is a first year intensive where the professor for your class is also your advisor for the year or until you pick a major. And I took a course called Just and Unjust Wars, which was like very, very theory heavy. And as a first year, I was like, whoa, I've never done this before. And we were debating really big questions like, is it ever justified to go to war? Is it ever not? And it was a 3-hour 9 a.m. class on a Friday, the worst possible time for a class ever. You're very tired and you don't want to be there. But in my little FYI, we had about like 14 students, and we very quickly became very close knit, and it became kind of a nice, fun thing to go to class. And I really appreciated that class because A, the professor became one of my advisors who I'd like to invite to my wedding one day, but B, what we did was we worked on one specific war for the entire semester and wrote 3 papers about that war. Was the war justified before it happened? Was the war justified during the war? And what happened after the war? And that process really helped me figure out what it means to write a research paper at Clark. And with the advice of with the advising from my professor, I was able to kind of perfect my system really early on and about how to write a paper. And I felt very, very equipped moving forward from there, just like having a grasp of international relations theory and also having a grasp of like actually what is a college level paper like.
Thank you. We had a few questions come in about Worcester. Morgan, I'm actually going to turn this to you. Can you just talk generally about some of your favorite things to do in Worcester and what it's like to live in Worcester as a Clark student?
Yeah, I really, really love living in Worcester. Especially, I will say you definitely don't need a car to live in Worcester, but it does help. It's much more of like a sprawling city. So I definitely think my knowledge of Worcester grew after I got my license. I did not come to college with my license. That's another thing I would not recommend. Just get it, folks, just to have it in your back pocket. So I think Worcester is like a really awesome city. I really love, I think a couple things stand out. I personally really like kind of the balance Worcester has between like green spaces and more city spaces. We have over 60 parks in the city, and apparently I was given this fact once that our ratio of green space to non-green space is actually very, very high for a city of its size. So I never really feel like I'm suffocated by the city, particularly because we're kind of surrounded by small towns in Massachusetts. So if you ever just want like a break from the city, like there's a lot of really great hiking trails around. I think that's really lovely. Additionally, the food scene in Worcester is really great. And just like there's a certain kind of cultural vibrancy here. About a quarter of the city was not originally born in the US, which I think is a really, really cool fact in terms of like just like the different art scenes around and like food scenes and like cultural festivals. Like that's all really exciting to me. I remember one time I was like driving down Main Street during like Lunar New Year, and there was just like a whole like parade going on with like different like floats and all of that stuff. It was really, really cool. So that's a really special thing about Worcester. I think also like, yeah, the art scene is really vibrant, both in terms of like local artists. There's like a big festival called Start on the Street that happens in non-COVID times every fall, like kind of right behind campus. So really, really close. And that showcases more local artists. But then there are also like bigger performing arts centers, like the DCU Center and the Palladium and stuff like that. So I really enjoy those as well. I think Worcester is also like a great location within Massachusetts and New England. So I'm not like, I really love Worcester, but Worcester is not everyone's cup of tea. But I do really like that it's like literally located right in the middle of Massachusetts. So basically, except for like the very far end of the Cape, everywhere in Mass is accessible in 2 hours by car, as well as commuter rails into Boston and Providence and some other cities around. So I think it's like just a really perfect location, both for the city itself, but then like kind of the broader context that it's in as well.
Thank you. Logan, you mentioned you're still living on campus. Is that correct? So I might send this question to you to pair with the food question. We had a few questions coming about residence hall life. Can you talk about it generally? We also had a couple specific questions. Can you throw in an answer to, is laundry free, and do some of the halls have brick walls?
All right, let me get the specific ones done first before I forget them because I'm scatterbrained. So, yes, laundry is free as long as you use cold water. If you are fiending for that hot water, it's going to be, I think, 50 cents. I've never had to use hot water. I'm not necessarily a laundry snob, but if that is something that you are particular about, yeah, it's totally an option. And then as far as brick wall is offered in most of the dorms, I think. I can't do the quick math in my head, but I think more than half of the dorms are brick wall, which is pretty cool. I lived in a dorm last year, the Johnson Sanford Center, which had some brick wall, and it was really nice for the aesthetic. Made it hard to hang up some posters, which was a little unfortunate, but it did kind of feel really cool. You really felt more part of Clark because everything is made of brick here. So that's like a really cool thing. So yeah, most options will have brick wall in the dorms themselves. Every building on the outside though is brick. So if that was more what you were getting at, there's that. As far as residential life in dorms themselves, so first of all, dorms are really fun. They're a really awesome place to meet a lot of people. You have residential advisors or RAs on every floor of whatever building you're living in, and they have to put on, well, first of all, they're kind of just like moderators of the floor to make sure everyone's following rules, staying safe, all that kind of such. And one thing that RAs have to do every month is put on community events. And especially as a first year student, those were my favorite thing to do whenever they came up. And I honestly think the most vital thing that you can do as a first year student besides passing your classes, because you just meet so many people. You really start to make Clark feel like a community and not just a school. And sometimes they're just like the silliest things ever. I actually went to one of my friend's RA events last year, it was ramen and foosball tournament. So of course I won because I'm kind of cracked at foosball, but it's just silly things like that you meet a lot of people, and they are especially essential as a first year student, I feel, because it's very easy to just kind of shut yourself off because the majority of people coming into Clark won't know people because we are a private school. So that's just a really good way to break the ice more. But honestly, like even just like aside from RA events and such, the halls are in general just a really social space. There's going to be common rooms, at least one common room in every building. Some buildings might have a common room every floor, and those are really cool places to meet people as well. Sometimes if you walk down the hall, some people might decorate their door. I know as a first year student, somebody held out a candy bucket for Halloween, and I may have taken like all of the Twix the first night. I was really feeding for some Twix, but like just like some super fun stuff like that might just happen. Unfortunately, COVID does make it a little bit harder to interact and engage with people in person, but that kind of affects everything. Regardless, still try to go to the RA events even if they are online. But dorms, every dorm is going to be doubles. There are a couple singles that, at least for first year students, are given out on need base. So pretty much you're always going to be in a double. And there's a couple different ways you can find a roommate. The way I suggest and the way most people have done it is you can fill out this like online survey that just kind of talks about like how you live. Do you go to sleep late or early? Do you like to have people over or not? That kind of stuff. And they'll match you with someone who gets as close to that as they can. It worked out incredibly for me. I ended up living with my first year roommate again my second year. And that doesn't always happen at a lot of schools. So I definitely suggest that. Otherwise, if you know somebody coming in, you could do that. Or you also get thrown into a Facebook group with when you're admitted, which I'm guessing a lot of you are in that right now. If you find somebody there that you want to live with, you can do that as well. So a lot of different options for rooming, and obviously rooming is kind of a big important part about dorm life because it's who you're living with. So definitely an important thing to take into consideration.
Thank you. So next question, we have a great one that came in. This one I'm going to open up to anyone who wants to answer. From a student's perspective, what is Clark doing to address systematic racism? Where do you think things need to change the most?
I can start with this question. I freelance for the Worcester magazine, so I've written a lot about how our Black Student Union is responding to systemic racism at Clark. We have a ton of organizations on campus that are doing this work. Student organizations specifically, our Black Student Union or BSU. Over the summer after George Floyd died, they put out a list of about 8 demands. Those demands include things like disarming university police and requiring everyone hired by Clark basically will to undergo anti-racism training yearly. And they have been in talks with the administration for the past year, very much trying to make sure all the demands are met. I think they've met a couple of them. I know the one demand they did meet was definitely hiring more Black mental health professionals for our Center for Personal Growth, for counseling and personal growth. But there's definitely a culture of activism on campus. I don't know a single student who isn't interested in holding the administration accountable to BSU's demands. We also have other organizations on campus, such as CAPE, or the Clark Athletics Inclusion Coalition, which is a group of student athletes hoping to focus specifically on racism in the athletic department. There's also the International Students' Rights Coalition, which is doing stuff for international students. There's really a lot of student activism going on to make sure this is a welcoming space for everybody.
Thank you. So the next question I'll maybe send back to Morgan to follow up on your Worcester answer. This is, a couple of folks have asked about this. Can you speak more generally to student life, both on campus and off campus, what that might look like? And if possible, can you also tie in maybe safety in campus, the surrounding area?
Yeah, I'll start with safety on campus. And I guess I've in the surrounding area as well. I live off campus right now. I can say that I personally haven't felt unsafe on campus or in my off-campus apartment really ever. That being said, most off-campus apartments are right near campus. So if you ever are in like a situation where you do feel unsafe, like all of the on-campus resources are basically available to you as well. When I say off-campus, I mean that I like look out my window and see one of our residence halls and can like wave hello at people through the window. So that's how close I am. The worst thing that's ever happened is like a couple Amazon packages getting stolen. But other than that, definitely very, very safe. In terms of kind of some safety resources, I think for me personally, the things that make me feel the most safe are kind of the culture among the students of looking out for each other and kind of student-led safety movements. Like Gary was talking about, there have been a lot of student activism to kind of transform how safety looks at Clark. And I think students are very much like looking out for each other. And a lot of the things that make me feel the most safe, like Clark Safety Escort and student-run sexual assault training and stuff like that, are very much student-driven. That being said, we do have university police and the typical blue light system. I've never known anyone that has had to use it. And that personally has not been a big part of my Clark experience utilizing those resources, but they are there. In terms of student life, I definitely would not say we are like a suitcase school. I think that's the phrase that people use. Most students do stay here or in the surrounding area on the weekends. I would say for me personally, I kind of like, I say like I have a 50-50 weekend where like Saturday, maybe like Friday and Saturday, I'll stay on campus. I'll go to an improv show or like some kind of student event. I'll have a club event. And then maybe the other night I might go out to dinner, or I guess now order takeout, or go to a park or like a local event. So I would say that like it's very much like a mix of kind of on campus and Worcester, but Clark does like do a lot to make sure that all of those Worcester events are accessible to students, even if they don't have like a car. In general, Worcester is very much a college like oriented place. So like the Worcester Art Museum, for instance, is free for college students. Clark will provide like transportation and buses to events like Taste of Shrewsbury Street, which is like a big like restaurant week for college students. You pay like, I think it's like $30 and you get like free food from like, I think 16 different restaurants. So a lot of food. So very much like even the stuff that is off campus and in Worcester is still like very easy to access for all students.
Thank you. The next question is a two-part question. I'm gonna give the first part to Logan, the second part to Gary. Logan, can you just talk about what like a typical first-year schedule might look like, and what exactly is LEAP for that first-year student as best you can?
All right, so first year schedule, it's gonna look fairly standard. You're gonna have 4 classes, unless obviously you decide to take a 5th, which I do not suggest right out the gate. But typically, you'll have 4 classes. Usually, they're gonna meet 2 times a week for about 75 minutes. Every so often, you might get lucky and get a Friday with no classes, like I had my first semester, which was super tight. But typically you'll just kind of spread out throughout the week. And you'll also have a new thing that they started just this past year is the Navigator course, which is kind of an extension from first year orientation, where you'll continue to meet with your peer mentor and kind of discuss Clark resources and ways that you can kind of better prepare yourself for the coming years in college. So, it's never like going to be an overly intense schedule. Some classes might have required discussion sections, which will just kind of be an extra 50 minutes on one of the weeknights, just to kind of help drill the information in a little bit. You might have a class that's pretty large, and it can be easy to kind of get lost in the shuffle of so many people. So they'll just break it up, and you can have a little bit more one-on-one time and really get the material down. As far as LEAP, it stands for Liberal Education and Effective Practice. And that's actually, it's not something that I think a lot of students like are inherently thinking about, but it's something that happens a lot at Clark, and it's extremely valuable. It talks like, it kind of means about getting, liberal education and then really putting that into practice. And so, I'm a math major, but and so like normally you would think I'm just worrying about crunching numbers, but given that I'm able to get this liberal education, I'm able to learn a lot of different things, like taking an education course, which at first was just a program of liberal studies course for me, but that effective practice side of that is going into a Worcester high school and working hands-on with students, learning how to be a teacher directly. And taking the things I've learned from my liberal education, as well as my major, and putting them all into practice directly. So it's not just, preparing from the book, it's getting a lot of hands-on work. And of course, that might look a little bit different now, given the state of the world. I'm not exactly sure. Unfortunately, I'm in the thick of my major, so I really am just doing a lot of math courses. But at least, pre-COVID, you really got a lot of classes that were very, very direct and hands-on. I got to work with a local Worcester organization for a business course on how to, kind of effectively execute models and ideas. So that was just like some really cool things that you get to try. Even just taking courses just to get rid of complete program of liberal studies requirements.
Thanks, Logan. So we have about 10 minutes left and about 10 questions with more coming in. So Gary, I'll pose this one to you in the long one, but we'll try and keep it short. Can you talk about what is a capstone and what are you doing for yours?
Sure. So a capstone is kind of like the culminating class of your major. It's a summation of everything that you've learned put into one thing. And the capstone classes, they really range based off of what your major is. I've heard of some capstones where their final project was making a comic book about their life, or doing an honors thesis for their capstone. But for me, my capstone is a bit more traditional. In the political science department, I'm currently taking a course on migration, refugees, and politics, where we meet every week, once a week for 3 hours and just discuss the hundreds of pages of reading that we had to read for that week and really get into the nitty gritty of like, what does it mean? What does like the international migration regime actually look like, and how can it be better? And at the end of this class, what I'm going to produce is a 30-page paper about a topic of my choice. I'm probably going to look into urbanization and how it impacts external migration. And it's a very niche topic that you write about, and you produce this large body of work of actual research that you have to do. And for me, should I ever choose to apply to grad school for political science, I would then have something from my capstone class that could serve as a writing sample for my grad school application. Yeah.
Thank you. Question, I'm not sure who this is best suited to, but can somebody speak to how foreign languages at Clark, and if there are study abroad programs that maybe would work for somebody who wants to study a language?
I can take this one. We have over 30 study abroad programs and 50 programs in about 30 countries, and it's very, very possible to study a language abroad. I actually did that myself. In the spring of last year, I was studying in Morocco and I was learning Arabic, and it was a very immersive experience. I was able to learn the basics of Arabic at class at school, but then also go ahead and practice that when I was like shopping in the Medina or talking with my host family. And it was very much a very like immersive experience and a really great way to learn the language. Unfortunately, my time was cut short because of COVID. I had to come back, but that's my experience abroad. I know on campus, at least, I have a couple of friends who are like French minors or Spanish majors, and they very much enjoyed the classes that they've taken at Clark. I'm not sure if Morgan or Logan, maybe you can speak to that a bit more, but that's me.
I can jump in a little bit. This is again not from my personal experience, but just from friends and coworkers and stuff like that. This kind of gets into another question about the relationship between Clark and other colleges in the area. But you can like cross-register across other colleges in the Worcester area very, very easily. You don't have to like apply or anything like that. So I know a lot of students in the foreign language department take advantage of Holy Cross's very, very, very robust language offerings as well. So that's a really great opportunity if you want to take a language that Clark doesn't have, and Clark will pay for your transportation and all of that stuff. So that's a very popular option. I also do just want to mention, because I follow the Office of Prestigious Scholarships and Fellowships on Instagram, a couple of our Clark students, including one of our current ambassadors, were just awarded or became finalists for like a critical language scholarship, which is like a big national scholarship for like, I don't know much about it, but it's a big deal. They're very excited. So definitely like, although it is like a smaller department, it's definitely like very high caliber and has a lot of opportunities both abroad and domestically.
Thank you. Logan, I'll get the next question to you. There's a couple questions asking about your experience with education. Can you talk about your work in the minor, volunteering, interning, etc., at local high schools?
Yeah, so the education program here is honestly the highlight of my academic career. I'm a math major, and I it's math, but like the education part has always been the one that I've kind of looked forward to the most when it comes to classes. They're really engaging. The stuff you're talking about is really relevant and important. The professors too are just like really such an attraction to the classes for me, because they all really care about what they're teaching and the problems that face education and how we can fix them going forward. And some of the beautiful things about the education courses is that they do require you to go in and working at local high schools, for example, or if you're maybe looking at elementary or maybe middle school, you can try one of those as well. So they actually are built into the classes and into the curriculum itself. For me, I started by volunteering at a local high school through the class, and then once the class was over, I loved it so much. I asked the teacher I was working with if I could keep coming back for the next semester. You really do learn a lot about not only about like how to be a teacher, but also about yourself, because taking those kind of classes really made me want to do education for my future, and really made me want to, teach high school math. And also the teachers that you're going to be working with know that you're a Clark student and know that you're really trying to get the most out of the experience you can. So they don't mind you asking as many questions as possible, asking to stay, after, get some advice, to work with the students. They'll usually always say yes. The teacher I had, for example, actually did this program and is eventually going to be the person that is my advisor for while I'm doing the 5th year program for education. So, you also make great connections along the way too.
Thank you. So we have just a couple minutes left and one big question. So I'm going to give this to all three of you as a good way to end. And I'm going to try and type some answers to the last ones while we're working on that. But I'll start with Morgan, and then we'll go to Gary and then Logan. Every campus has its pros and cons. Can you talk about what are the pros and cons of Clark in relation to our campus?
So the first thing I thought of was like the very physical space of campus. So my apologies if this was not what you were getting at, but this is where my mind went. A pro and a con of Clark's campus is it is a very small like campus. It takes up like geographically about 2 city blocks around. So it is like very compact, which on one hand is great. I can get across campus in 5 minutes. I can roll out of bed for my 9 a.m. at like 8:45 and it's great. The flip side is I did definitely envision myself like going on long walks around campus and like getting that fitness in. For reference, my parents went to Indiana University, so that's kind of the only college campus I'd ever grown up with, and that is huge and sprawling, and that's very much what I was imagining. So there are definitely times where I'm like, wow, it would be nice if there was like a small secluded corner of campus where I could go where no one else is going to find me and I can just sit in, I don't know, under a tree and like be in my own space. But I do genuinely like that it's a more compact campus, both like practically, but also like does make it feel a little bit more like community oriented, I think. So that's my answer.
Gary?
Yeah, for me, for cons, I also thought of very physical spaces. I wish we had another, like more libraries. We just kind of have one really, really big one that's in the center of campus. And I'm running out of places to be in the library to study and like switch up. Like I'm someone who needs like a different scene every day. I literally just wish we had more libraries. But a pro, I lots of pros, I think. I think for me, the biggest one is definitely the support system at Clark. And we've all spoken to this a lot. I just think that everyone who like has a job here genuinely cares about the well-being of our students. This like was most obvious to me when I was like forced to leave Morocco during COVID times. Our study abroad office was responding to everyone very quickly. And I'm like, there's literally just 2 of them and they're responding to like the dozens and dozens of students who are struggling to come home. And they helped like pay for my flight, which was quite expensive to come back early. And that's just like one example of many that I have of the support system at Clark just being genuinely very helpful.
Morgan and Gary talked about physical spaces, and that was what I was thinking. So let me just like switch it up a little bit. But for me, like one pro is that it is a pretty small student body. I kind of like that. I like being able to walk to class and say hi to everybody that I know and feel like I'm in a familiar place, because I feel like people really have a lot to do with familiarity and where you're at. You could be in a place you've never been at, but as long as you're surrounded by people you know, you can feel just as comfortable. And so I feel like that has been really huge for me, is I can really get to know people more on a personal level, and feel happier that I'm constantly surrounded by people that I know and like. That does lead to a con though, which is that, smaller spaces tend to get a little clickier. And, I've always been the kind of person that likes to just have as many friends as possible. I don't like to kind of pigeonhole myself into one friend group. So I like to expand and make as many friends as possible. And that can be a little tougher when some really tight bonds are formed that last for like whole 4 years. It hasn't been like a huge problem. It's just, something that does, it could be better. But I mean, that being said, like the student body size is just small enough that you can, see people constantly that you remember, but it's also just large enough that if you need to avoid somebody, you can usually avoid them and have no problems. So, yeah.
Thank you. So I was able to get most of the other questions answered, but I did have one I haven't had time to answer, and I'd like to try and get it in because it's the last one. Anyone's welcome to touch on this. Can somebody just speak to very quickly, what is the LGBTQ plus population and student life like at Clark?
I can take this one. As a member of the community, there's quite a few of us. And I don't think I've ever met anyone who was intolerant or just tolerant. I think the community, like this entire student body, is just very accepting of different people's identities. Yeah, it's very welcoming, and we have a couple of groups that do revolve around the LGBTQ plus community. There's a group called Prism, I believe. I know they used to put on when pre-COVID, they would put on like a yearly drag show, which was always really fun to attend. And then there's also what's called Cutie Sock, which is an affinity space for queer and trans students of color specifically. I attended a couple of those meetings before. Very wholesome space. We'd watch movies together. Really nice community at Clark, honestly.
Thanks, Gary, and thank you all my panelists too for taking a couple extra minutes. I know we're over time. So with that, we are out of questions, which is good. We got at least everything answered in some capacity. But if you have more, and I know you all do, feel free to email us at admissions@clarku.edu. We are happy to take your questions. I may be the one answering them as an admissions counselor, but if you want a student to answer them, we've got lots of students working with us, so we can get them to our students as well. So again, congratulations on your admission to Clark. We're really excited to have you as part of our community. And thanks for taking some time with us tonight. We know there's a lot of Zoom, and opting into more Zoom is impressive. So thank you all, and we're wishing you well.